when I come to the United Arab Emirates, I've been visiting the United Arab Emirates for a little over 20 years now. And I'm often struck by how much change that I see in the Emirates. And when you think about these are these before and after pictures that you often see. You see these before and after pictures in government offices in Abu Dhabi and government offices in Dubai. And when you think about the before and after, it's certainly stark, in the Emirates. But I would argue that it's not just in the Emirates. I would argue that there is a before and after in the world we're living in today. And if you look at the 1970s and the late 1970s into the early 1980s, you see a lot of these before and after pictures. You see before and after pictures in China. You see before and after pictures in India. What we've witnessed over the past 25 to 30 years is a geo-economic transformation of our world, in which we've seen the emerging markets, the so-called emerging markets, we might call them the re-emerging markets, but the emerging markets, which accounted for less than a quarter of GDP about 30 years ago, now account for more than half of global GDP, right? And so we are seeing this dramatic transformation, and in my view, the rise of Asia. Again, the re-emergence of Asia is one of the great geo-economic stories of our time. And I think it's important to locate Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and the Emirates in the story of Asia as well. We are told, of course, that we're in the Middle East, right? And we're told we're in the Middle East because an American naval strategist, writing in the year 1902 for a British policy journal, told us we're in the Middle East, right? Writing at the time, he was looking for a term to define this area between Europe and the Far East, and he coined this term, the Middle East, and it really stuck. But I would argue that we're in West Asia, and after all, it's a 2-hour flight from Dubai to Karachi. It's a 4-hour flight from Dubai to Beirut. It's a shorter flight from Abu Dhabi to Mumbai than it is Abu Dhabi to Cairo. And as we talk about the Asian century and the Easternization and the rise of Asia, we do have to consider the story of West Asia as well, being a part of the middle part of the Asia story. Now, yesterday on January 15th, 2018, there were 353,424 children born. Now, I don't know that for a fact, but we do know that if there are 129 million children born every year, and we take that to every day, we have that's 353,424. In the 20 minutes that I'm going to spend with you setting the scene, there's going to be about 4,000 children being born. Now, where are they being born? They're being born in Asia, Africa, predominantly, but also Latin America. They're being born in the 85% of the world that lives outside of Northern America and Europe. Now, this is important. This is not a forecast going out to the year 2030 or 2040. Currently, as we speak, 85% of the world lives outside of Northern America and Europe. 85% of the world lives in the non-West, so to speak. Sometimes we talk about the West and the rest. My colleague at the Emerge 85 lab, Michal Al-Gargawi, often points out that no, it's actually the West and the most, because the 85% lives outside of Northern America and Europe. Now, when we look at population growth, Africa is going to add another 500 million people by the year 2030. Asia will add another 600 million people. If we extrapolate that to the year 2050, Africa's population is going to double. It's going to actually double to 2.4 billion people. This is an extraordinary level of population growth. And so when we created this lab called the Emerge 85 lab, my biggest problem is going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we may have to call it the Emerge 86 lab or the Emerge 87 lab, because the population growth is in Africa and Asia and to some extent in Latin America, and population is shrinking in Europe. Now, where are we going? Well, wherever we're going there fast. We're going there in a world where we have about 250 hours of YouTube video uploaded every minute. We have 3 million pieces of content put onto Facebook every minute. We've never been this connected in human history. So wherever we're going there fast. And we all remember Gordon Moore, of course, the founder of Intel and Moore's Law, who said that essentially computing power, processing power, will double every 2 years or so. And it turned out to be a pretty accurate prediction that he made back in the 1960s, which is why we're on the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution that is transforming our world. But we all know Gordon Moore's law, but how many of you know Mike Tyson's law? Mike Tyson, of course, being the great American boxer and philosopher, Mike Tyson, who said everyone has a plan, that is, until you get punched in the face. The punches will come. The punches will come in, the punches will come in geopolitical risks. We're living in a world of, accelerated geopolitical risks, whether it's North Korea and the threats to the Korean Peninsula, whether it is the Arab uprisings that can upend a regional order, upend 150 years of authoritarian leaders, essentially in a matter of months. We are living in a world of accelerated geopolitical risks. Technology disruptions. We are living, of course, in a world of technology disruptions when who could have imagined the rise of ride sharing? Who could have imagined the rise of the smartphone? I mean, we all have these smartphones in our pockets, which has the same computing capacity that NASA had to send a man to the moon. The same computing capacity, and it's in our pockets. And it's in pockets in India and Egypt and all across Latin America and South Asia. Markets do fall. We seem to forget that sometimes. We certainly don't forget that when it comes to oil prices, but markets do fall, and so there's all sorts of risks in climate change. I'm quite heartened by the fact that the UAE has a minister of climate change, and I joked with him last night that we can't deny it. He does exist, so this minister does exist, but we do have climate change, and everybody in this room understands the importance of that. Now, there's, in addition to natural storms, there are social storms. Facebook has 2 billion users. If Facebook were a country, it would be the largest country in the world. You can call it Facebookistan. 2 billion users. So when we're looking at this world with such rapid change, and we're looking at the world in which the geo-economics of our world are shifting so rapidly, it's important to hold on to some specific, what I call disruption-proof trends. And I touched on a few of them earlier, and let me just go through them. These are all 5 headlines. My background, I'm a journalist. I sometimes refer to myself as a recovering journalist. I'm in the academic world, but I still love to think in terms of headlines. And these are my 5 headlines, and they're all numbers. And I'll go through each of them very briefly. 85%, well, I touched on that. That is 85% of the world living outside of Northern America and Europe. Again, that's not a forecast, that's today. Of that, 3 out of 4 people currently live in Africa or Asia. Again, these are not forecasts, that's today. 3 out of 4 people are living in Africa or Asia. And you know what? It doesn't matter who sits in the Élysée Palace in France. It doesn't matter what President Donald Trump tweets today. It doesn't matter who sits in the White House. It doesn't matter that Angela Merkel formed a coalition government or not. There will still be 85% of the world living outside of Northern America and Europe. There will be 129 million children born every year. And the demographic domination of Asia and Africa will be a reality of our world. Asia in the year 2030, nearly 6 out of 10 people will live in Asia. The demographic domination of Asia and Africa will slightly increase by the year 2030. We'll go from 3 out of 4 to 78% of the world living in Asia or Africa. In China, there will be 400 million cars. Estimates, again, one must always be humble with their estimates and future projections, given how fast things are changing and given how fast technology is changing. 2/3 of all air travel will be in the emerging markets, mostly in Asia. There has been an air travel revolution in Asia over the past 15 years. It would have been unremarkable to be a member of the Indian middle class 30 years ago and never get on an airplane. It would be entirely remarkable if you never got on an airplane now. We're seeing a dramatic change. 129 million births, as we noted, all across Asia, all across Africa, 129 million. 1.5 million per week. This is headline number 3. This is the number of new urban dwellers every single week. 1.5 million new urban dwellers every single week. When you count both rural to urban migration and you count the new births. 1.5 million every single week. So we have a world that's 54% urban today, headed for 66% urban in the not too distant future. You know, Africa in 1950 had 3 cities of 1 million or more. Today there's 56 plus cities. Asia is headed for 2/3 urban by the year 2050. Now, cities, as we know, are economic engines. Jakarta accounts for about 1/4 of Indonesia's GDP. Seoul accounts for about half of South Korea's GDP. There was a McKinsey study that you all may remember of a few years ago that noted that 600 cities account for about 2/3 of global GDP. Cities are our economic engines. So 1.5 million per week moving from a rural environment to an urban environment or being born in an urban environment. As noted, cities are economic engines. They're also centers of innovation. Asian cities in particular, we're living in the era of the Asian city. We have a world in which 4 of the top 5 and 6 of the top 10 largest cities are in Asia now. One of the defining features of our age will be the rise, in many ways, of the Asian city. Now, the headline number 4, 5 billion by the year 2030. What do I mean by that? There are currently about 3 billion people in the global middle class. And these are estimates made by Homi Kharas at the Brookings Institution, one of my colleagues who's done seminal work on the global middle class issue. And he points out that by the year, essentially by the year 2030, we're going to see a massive shift in the global middle class, in which 2/3 of the global middle class will be in Asia. The next 2 billion, of the next 2 billion in the global middle class, 88% will come from Asia. 88% will come from Asia. So this is why you're seeing companies like Starbucks and Unilever and Nestle and Uber and other major corporations chasing the Asian middle class, chasing this new global middle class. In fact, I would argue it's the great commercial prize of the 21st century. If you read annual reports of major global multinational companies, they all point out the importance of capturing a piece of the emerging markets, capturing a piece of the Asian middle class. So the global middle class is shifting so dramatically that we're headed for a world in which 2/3 of the global middle class will be in Asia, and less than 1/4 of the global middle class will be in Europe and the United States. Less than 1/4. Again, these are dramatic geoeconomic shifts in our world. Consumer spending of $56 trillion by the year 2030, 2/3 of that growth, again, is going to come from the emerging markets. So Asia is also the world's largest importing region, imports 36% of world imports. Asia accounts for 1/3 of the global economy. In many ways, what we're seeing, again, is not just the emerging markets, but re-emerging markets. Asia is retaking its place as a center of geoeconomic power. The 5th headline is under 30. The world is young. The world is young. More than half the world's population is under the age of 30. But in some of the regions that I was talking about, the population numbers are much younger. The median age in sub-Saharan Africa, today is 19. The median age in Europe is 42. It gives you a sense of the dramatic disparities in age. Under 30, so the world is young. Now, you add all of these things together and you put the smartphone revolution in this story. You know, we've gone from 0 smartphones roughly in 2007, and we're headed for 6 billion of them by the year 2021. From 0 to 6 billion in less than 15 years. I can't think of a technology with this fast and deep an adoption rate as we've seen. So nexus states and nexus cities, places like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, Hong Kong, are going to be well positioned, you know, in this future. The China demand engine is going to continue to play an important role in our global economy. India is rising. Every month, 1 million Indians turn 18. Every single month, 1 million Indians turn 18. Now, every second, 3 Indians experience the internet for the first time. India is going online in a dizzyingly rapid pace. This is why Amazon is spending $5 billion to try to get the Indian e-commerce market. Now, there's a lot of good news, actually. We've been winning the war on poverty. We've done well in winning the war on poverty. When you look at the poverty numbers, we've seen dramatic reductions in poverty in East Asia and Pacific and in South Asia. But of course, let's not forget Tyson's Law, of course. There will be punches, and they will continue to come. Air pollution is a punch. There are, according to the World Bank, 6.5 million people who die every year simply because of air pollution. 6.5 million people who die every year because of diseases contracted because of air pollution. We are still seeing massive inequality. We're still seeing far too many people living in slums. Slums in many ways are a symptom of this rapid urbanization that we are talking about. The jobs crunch. No matter where you stand on the Africa is rising narrative, and I have tended to stand on the bullish side, you're not going to be able to create enough jobs for this level of population growth. And so what is going to happen is we're going to see continued migration. We're going to see continued economic migrants, particularly as Africa urbanizes, headed for a billion urban population by the year 2050. We're going to see more along the lines of the refugee crisis. We're going to see the Mediterranean Sea continue to be a place where people will seek a better future. And it's going to roil the politics of Europe for the next 10 or 15 years as this migration continues. And now let me just touch briefly in the final few minutes on an area of urbanization. Now, I'm hoping you will have all the answers here, because what I can tell you, I can give you the macro trends. But I don't have the answers to some of the big questions on urbanization, some of the big questions on megacities. We've never experienced megacities like this, cities of 10 million people or more. The top 10 megacities, of course, you have a dramatic rise from Delhi, Shanghai, Mumbai, and Beijing over the past 10 or 15 years into the ranks of the top 6 megacities. We've never seen anything like this before in these megacities. And then these are the next 10 megacities. We see, cities like Lagos and Manila and Guangzhou and Rio. Now, it's not only megacities, but we're seeing these key natural threats. If you're a Southeast Asian city, you're going to face, the potential of floods. You're going to face the potential of cyclones, and we're seeing this everywhere. There's immense needs, not only in the megacities, but also in the mid-sized cities, in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. And the fourth industrial revolution is probably coming at precisely the wrong time for some of these cities, and particularly some of these mega cities, because it is going to disrupt supply chains. It is going to disrupt manufacturing jobs. And I'm not sure where we're going to find the jobs that are going to be required for these young populations that I just described. Automation and robots are shrinking the manufacturing jobs pool. It is conceivable, as some have argued, that the next financial meltdown could come from mega cities. Technology in the megacity. Technology is not just a luxury, it's a matter of survival. And so I want to just close by saying that how we handle urbanization is the great challenge of our era. When we think about it, if we go back, let's just go back just for a moment, 10,000 years, when we were still hunter-gatherers. We were still foraging for nuts and killing prey and eating our food. And about 8,000 years ago in this region, in the Fertile Crescent, people figured out how to farm. And as a result of that farming, we had surplus food. And as a result of that surplus food, we could build the first towns and villages and cities. But it took a long, long time for us to become an urban civilization. In the year 1800, the world was 3% urbanized. In the year 1900, the world was 15% urbanized. So this is new. This is new to us as a species, in a sense. And so how we challenge and how we face the challenge of urbanization, how we meet those immense needs that I just described earlier, is going to be the true test of our civilization and the true test of our future. And I'm delighted to be here at Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week because I've learned how many of you are tackling the challenges. And I look forward to the next panel, which I'm told will provide all the solutions. Is that right? Thank you very much. Thank you.